arranging themselves on his furniture as though they had every right to be there. The younger man, the brother, Jian assumed, placed a small suitcase on the table beside the money that still lay where Jian had left it. Mei Hua's things, he explained simply. Clothes, jewelry, photographs. She will want them close. The mother began to weep again, soft tears that she wiped away with a handkerchief embroidered with tiny flowers. She was such a good girl, she whispered. So obedient, so dutiful. She never gave us a moment's trouble until... She trailed off, her words hanging in the air like an unfinished prayer. Lin Weidong shot her a sharp look, and she fell silent, pressing the handkerchief to her eyes. Until what? Jian asked, his curiosity overcoming his fear. The family exchanged glances, some communication passing between them that Jian couldn't interpret. The silence stretched uncomfortably before the father finally spoke. Until she met a young man who filled her head with romantic nonsense, he said, his voice taking on an edge of old anger. A boy with no prospects and no respect for family traditions. He convinced her that love was more important than duty, that her own desires mattered more than her obligations to her parents. The brother shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Mei Hua became difficult in her final months, he said carefully. She spoke of leaving Beijing, of starting a new life in another city. She said she would rather die unmarried than accept the husband we had chosen for her. And then she took ill, the mother added quickly, as though eager to move past the subject of her daughter's defiance. A fever that the doctors couldn't cure. She died in her sleep peacefully. There was something wrong with their explanation, some note of falseness that made Jian's skin crawl. The way they avoided his eyes when they spoke of her death, the careful parsing of their words, the tension that filled the room whenever her final months were mentioned. It all suggested a story with darker chapters than they were willing to tell. What happened to the young man she loved? Jian asked. The silence that followed was answer enough. The mother's renewed weeping, the brother's rigid posture, the father's suddenly clenched jaw, all spoke of a tragedy that went beyond simple heartbreak. He left the city after her death, Lin Weidong said finally. Found it difficult to remain in a place that held so many painful memories. But the way he said it made Jian wonder if the young man had left voluntarily, or if he had been encouraged to depart by forces beyond his control. The thought sent ice through his veins, and for the first time since opening the door, he began to consider the possibility that he was dealing with people who had committed acts they preferred not to discuss. The mother began opening the suitcase, revealing its contents with the reverence of someone handling sacred relics. Inside were the possessions of a life cut short, silk dresses in jewel tones, jade jewelry that caught the light like captured water, photographs of a young woman with intelligent eyes and a smile that seemed to hold secrets. Lin Mei Hua had been beautiful, Jian saw, but it was a fragile beauty, the kind that spoke of sensitivity rather than strength, of someone who felt too deeply for her own good. In the photographs, she smiled with genuine joy, but there was something in her eyes that suggested a person perpetually on the verge of tears, as though happiness were a foreign emotion she was still learning to wear. She loved poetry, the mother said, lifting a small book from the suitcase. The pages were yellowed with age and handling, filled with neat annotations in black ink. She would sit for hours reading verses about love and loss, copying her favorite lines into her journal. She was too romantic for her own good, the father added, his voice carrying disapproval even in death, always dreaming of grand passions instead of accepting practical realities. We tried to teach her that marriage was a matter of compatibility and mutual benefit, not emotion, but she refused to listen. The brother placed a photograph on the table. Lin Meihua in a red dress, her hair adorned with flowers, her smile radiant despite something indefinably sad in her eyes. This was taken on her 20th birthday, he said, 3 months before she died. She was so happy that day, despite everything. Everything? Jian studied the photograph more closely, trying to read the story in her expression. The broken engagement, the mother explained, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. She had been betrothed to the son of a family friend, a good match, financially and socially suitable. But she refused to go through with the wedding, said she could never love him, could never be happy as his wife. She had met that boy by then, the father said, his voice hardening, the one who filled her head with romantic foolishness. He convinced her that she deserved better than the husband we had chosen, that love was more important than family stability. Jian found himself studying Lin Meihua's face in the photograph, trying to imagine what she had felt when forced to choose between duty and desire. The joy in her expression was real, but it carried an undertone of desperation, as though she were clinging to happiness in the face of forces determined to destroy it. "What are my obligations as her husband?" he asked, the question escaping before he could stop it. Lin Weidong smiled for the first time, an expression that should have been reassuring, but somehow wasn't. There was something predatory in it, the satisfaction of a hunter who had successfully cornered his prey. Nothing burdensome, he assured him. Light incense for her every evening at sunset. Burn offerings of food and paper money on the anniversary of her birth and death. Speak to her kindly when she visits, and include her in your daily prayers. In return, she will bring you good fortune and prosperity. And if I refuse? The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. The mother stopped crying, the brother's hands clenched into fists, and the father's smile faded into something that might have been pity or threat. Breaking a marriage contract brings terrible consequences, Lin Weidong said slowly, each word carefully weighted, for both the living and the dead. Meihua has been waiting 3 years for a husband, 3 years of solitude and sorrow. To deny her now, after accepting her dowry, would be a cruelty beyond measure. As he spoke, Jian felt a sudden pressure in his chest, as though invisible hands were squeezing his ribs. The sensation lasted only a moment, but it left him gasping and somehow certain that the warning was more than metaphorical. She can be very persistent when she wants something, the brother added quietly. Even in life, she had a strong will. Death has not made her more accommodating. The family began to gather their things, preparing to leave, but the mother lingered over the suitcase, touching each item with the careful reverence of someone handling relics. She loved white chrysanthemums most of all, she said, lifting the dried bouquet she had given Jian. The flowers crumbled at her touch, releasing their bitter scent into the small room. She grew them on the balcony of our old apartment, said they reminded her of peace. When she became ill, she asked us to fill her room with them, said their smell brought her comfort. We brought some from her grave, the brother said, producing a fresh bouquet from a bag Jian hadn't noticed. She would want you to have them. The flowers were perfect, their white petals pristine and their scent overwhelming. As Jian took them, he felt that same strange shock of recognition, stronger this time, as though these flowers were somehow connected to dreams he couldn't quite remember. They left shortly after, taking the empty suitcase but leaving behind its contents and a strange heaviness in the air that made Jian's apartment feel smaller than before. He sat among Lin Meihua's possessions, surrounded by the detritus of a life he had never known, and tried to convince himself that he was the victim of an elaborate confidence scheme.